everyone. How are you all doing after lunch? Okay? This is not the time for the siesta. I'm just telling you that now. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. My name is Alexia. I lead future of work research for Microsoft, which is a very big job. What we do essentially is ask big questions about work, where work is heading, and then we try to understand the patterns that emerge as we analyze all the data that we collect across our many work streams. I'm super excited to be here to share with you some of what we've been seeing over the last 6 months as AI has entered this equation. Excited to be with you here in person, excited for those of you who are watching at home online. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about is the pace of work, because work is evolving very, very quickly. And I think it's something we feel almost physically now. Work has changed at a pace far quicker than anything we've known for a very long time. And so when we first started to do this research, I was just really interested in the idea of evolution as a concept, because that's what's happening right now. Work is evolving. So what I asked my research team to do was to try to just do a literature review on evolution. Didn't have to be related to work, just understanding different stories about what has evolved. And one of my favorite stories was about the evolution of the brain. Now, I promise there is a point to all of this. The evolution of the brain is a fascinating thing, because as a species, we actually have quite big brains, specifically as relates to this concept of the brain-to-body mass ratio. Now, the brain-to-body mass ratio, all that is essentially is how much of your body mass is made up of brain. Can anyone guess why that might be important? The bigger the brain, the more intelligent you are. Are there any big brains in the room? Raise your hands. So it's important, the size of the brain, particularly the brain-to-body mass ratio. And what we discovered is that our brains haven't actually always been this size. The brain has evolved to be this size for a relatively short period of time. Now, to give you some indication of the brain-to-body mass ratio, the hippopotamus, only 0.04% of the hippopotamus's body mass is made up of brain, not a very intelligent creature. The elephant, slightly better, 0.18% of its body mass made up of brain. Are there any cat lovers in the room? Raise your hand. Let's name and shame them. Dog lovers? Raise your hands. Ah, my people. I'm so sorry, fellow dog lovers. Dogs are first on this list, followed by cats. So sorry to disappoint you. If this was about emotional intelligence, it would probably look a little bit different, let's face it. The dog, 0.80% of body mass made up of brain, followed by the cat, 1% of its body mass made up of brain, and then humans. 2.5% of our body mass is made up of brain. And this might not seem like a lot, but this is extraordinary. It's double, more than double that of the cats. And this denotes that we are the single most intelligent species on the planet. We might not always act that way, but this is fact. Again, this hasn't always been the case. This is relatively recent that our brains are this size. When we look at our ancestors and we dig them up, we actually saw that their brains were actually quite a bit smaller. So we've evolved over time very, very quickly. So this was the research question that was asked, was how did our brains evolve to be so big? Would anyone like to guess? Just shout out a word. And AI is not the right answer here. Any guesses? Survival? Okay, so like outpacing dinosaurs or something like that? Okay, interesting guess. Anyone else? No? All right. I usually get the right answer here. Maybe it's the siesta time that's causing problems here. The correct answer here, although respect for, let's give her a round of applause, by the way, for the survival guess, the one answer. Sorry, my friend. The correct answer is actually a diet, and more specifically, cooking. Now, to understand this, you have to understand the diet of our prehistoric ancestors. Now, back in the caveman days, what we were eating primarily was raw foods, right? Nuts, seeds, raw meat, raw vegetables, and these foods are incredibly hard to digest, very difficult on the system. Just imagine eating a raw potato right now. You'd probably be spending all of your time asleep because it would be so hard to digest. And our body has a finite amount of energy that it has to distribute to all different parts of the body. And back in the caveman day, we were spending most of that energy on digestion. But then one day, caveman or cavewoman or cave person discovers fire. And they decide to put the raw potato on the fire. And what happens is the raw potato gets softer, and so it gets easier to eat. And as a result, we don't need to spend so much energy digesting it. So the body has this surplus of energy, and it's thinking, what should I do with all this extra energy I now have? And it routes it up to the brain. And that is how the brain has grown over time. It is literally because of cooking. And I love this story because, what is closer to our humanity than cooking, right? It's about nourishment, it's about creativity, it's about community. Cooking is why we are the single most intelligent species on the planet. And really, the takeaway I want you to have from this is that what we spend our time and energy on matters. It matters hugely. So if we think about the process of eating and digesting, of putting physical matter through our bodies, this was the system, in the caveman era, right? We consumed it and then we processed it. And by virtue of inserting one more stage into that process, which was cooking, we were able to free up a whole bunch of time and energy to divert it to a part of our brain that could really use it. And I think this is true not just of physical matter, not just of food, but of mental matter as well, what we put through our brains. Now, those of you who have kids, you probably do this already, right? You want to be really careful what they're consuming, what they're reading. You want to be researching the videos you put in front of them, the books you put in front of them. We need to be careful about what we spend our time and energy on when it comes to our minds, too. Bringing this all back to work, what we're seeing in this era right now is a crisis of time and energy. Specifically, what we're calling a time and energy deficiency. So we conduct this global survey every year. It's called the Work Trend Index Survey. It goes out to 31,000 people across the whole world. And this was one of the main findings we saw consistently. 64% of employees saying, we don't have enough time and energy to get our work done. And these are finite resources. You only have 40 hours a week, maybe a bit more, to do your work. You only have a certain amount of energy to give in your day. And we don't have enough of these resources to be high performers. And what this points to is that our environment is evolving quicker than we can keep pace. And this is a classic anthropological problem. This is not new. Anthropologists see this all the time, everywhere. I'll give you an example that has nothing to do with work. Short-sightedness, the ability to see far, that has been on a historic uprise. And researchers don't really know why this is. Like, why is it that we can no longer see very far? And the best study that they've done has been because we are spending so much less time outside and so much more time inside. And what is inside? Computers, screens, all around, right? Exactly right, he says as he puts the phone down. Very good. And as a result, if we think about the prehistoric caveman, they weren't really spending much time indoors looking at screens, right? Our eyeballs were created to look far into the horizon. And the environment we're in now has evolved more quickly than our eyeballs. So as a result, short-sightedness on an uprise. Thankfully, we are the most intelligent species on the planet, so we have ways of dealing with this. Does anyone know a good way of dealing with short-sightedness? Some of you are wearing them. Glasses, contact lenses. And this is the ingenuity of humans, right? We have ways of solving these problems. So let's talk about how this affects work. And I want to be really specific when I talk about the environment, because the environment sounds vague. Let's make it really tangible. Any environment is made up of two key dimensions: the dimension of space, where do we work, and the dimension of time, when do we work. And for a pretty long time, if we think about the first era of information work, 1950s, post-Second World War, most of work happened in this box, which was in the office, that was the where of work, and it was synchronous. It was in meetings, and with good reason, right? Think about the 1950s, no email, no IMs. If you wanted to get stuff done, you got into a meeting. You didn't type up memos, send it to a secretary, have another secretary send it to someone else. The way work got done was in meetings. So in the office, in meetings. This sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? All of our designs of work were based on this. Every single work design you have encountered as an information worker started here in this quadrant. But then, circa 2000, the internet arrived. And what the internet did was that it made asynchronous work possible. Email came along, fax came along. The ability to do work asynchronously just as effectively as synchronously became a reality for information workers. And so this is how we've operated for a very long time, working in the office, synchronously and asynchronously. And then 2020 came along. And 2020 was an interesting year for the world of work, because 2020, of course, was the COVID-19 pandemic. And what the pandemic did for us was it forced the single largest remote work experiment we have seen. And it expanded the dimension of space. We no longer just have to work from the office to be productive. We now know that we can work just as productively from home or remotely as from an office. And this, by the way, is what hybrid work is. That's all it is. We overcomplicate it a lot. This is what hybrid work is. It's space, time, asynchronous, synchronous, home, office. And this is an extraordinary shift in how we work. Going from 1 quadrant to 4 in the span of 50 years, that is a pretty remarkable evolution. And it's not over. Because now, a new little development is happening, which is the world of AI. And so the question, of course, is, where does AI fit in the work environment of today? And this is not a theoretical question. I asked my research team, where would you put AI in this 2x2? And the thing is, it does not belong in this 2x2, because it does not belong in the dimension of space, and it does not belong in the dimension of time, because it is a brand new dimension. Up until this point in time, our primary way of working has always been with other humans, has always been with human intelligence. And today marks the point in time in which artificial intelligence becomes widely accessible and available to all information workers. And that essentially means that we have now entered a 3-dimensional world of work. This is incredible, by the way. The concept of having all of these options available to us is phenomenal. But it's also a lot. It's a lot to navigate. And very simple questions we used to have answers to are not so simple anymore. So for space, for example, where do I work? Depending on who you are, it could be 5 days a week in the office, or it could be like me, from my study back in England. I'm a full-time remote worker. When do I get my best work done? Another, what used to be a really interesting and easy question, used to be 9 to 5, right? But today, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, when I'm out on a run at 7 in the morning, that's when I get my best work done. But for some of you, you might be parents. It might be at 9 p.m. in the evening when you've tucked your kids to bed and you can finally go through your inbox. And both of those answers are OK now. Same thing for intelligence. Moving forward, when we have a question that we need answered, we used to just rely on our human colleagues, our managers, our peers, and we are entering a time now in which artificial intelligence will be another available option to us, and we will go to AI to get the answers to our questions. So this is one of the first lessons I want you to think about. We need to expand our definition of AI. It is not just an add-on tool that we're going to put into work, into existing work. It is a brand new dimension of work, and we need to treat it as such. Anyone who is telling you that AI is just an add-on productivity tool is not fundamentally accepting all of the mindset and behavioral changes we need to drive in order to truly unlock its promise. And so for every single one of these dimensions, for time, for space, and now for intelligence, we need to ask ourselves, how do we use this dimension wisely? A lot of you will probably be doing this for the office already, right? Like, how do we use the office wisely? What is the point of the office? Same thing for synchronous work. What is the point of a meeting? Why should we be in a meeting? And the same thing for artificial intelligence. How do we use this new dimension wisely? So this was literally the question I was tasked with answering. And we did a whole bunch of research to try to get some answers for you. This is the Microsoft Work Trend Index research that we run. We have it all uploaded on our website. You can go check it out if that's of interest, but it's a huge undertaking. We do a lot of different types of research. And I want to share with you the 4 key conclusions that we got to. Like the 4 key conclusions that really told us what is the future of this new dimension. So let's start with the time and energy deficiency. So you remember I told you 64% of the population suffering from time and energy deficiency. When I talk to leaders about this, some of them had said to me, it's not great, the fact that 64% of my employees are suffering from a time and energy deficiency, but what can I do about it? And the thing is, if that's your reaction, you're in trouble. Because when we plucked out this 64% of the population, we looked at what are the problems that they are experiencing and the problems that they are going to create for the business. And we saw that this 64% of the population were twice as likely to leave their jobs and 3.5 times as likely to say they struggle to be innovative. And these are very much business problems, my friends. These are not just talent problems. If as a leader, over half of your workforce is thinking of leaving you or is struggling to be innovative, you are going to feel that on your bottom line. And aside from feeling it on your bottom line, it's just not very nice. We don't want to have a workforce that's stressed, that's tired, that's harried. It's not a nice way to work. So what was our second research conclusion? Well, the time and energy deficiency is not random. There are reasons for it. And this was the next phase in the research, was trying to understand, well, what is causing this time and energy deficiency? Now, you will be very tempted to blame yourselves, to say it's me, I'm not good enough, I'm not skilled enough, I don't plan enough. It is not you. The work environment is evolving quicker than our ability to keep pace. Remember this. The work environment is evolving quicker than your ability to keep pace, and that is what is causing the problem. So what we did is we took this 64% of the population, we isolated them, and then we looked at the experiences they were having that were pretty severe. What we saw was that these 64% were twice as likely to say they struggle with too many meetings, 2.5 times as likely to say they spend too much time searching for information, and 2.5 times likely to say they don't have enough focus time. Raise your hand if you've experienced at least one of these this week. You see, whenever someone doesn't raise their hand, I'm like, who are they? So I can go and talk to them and find out where they work and how it's such a great experience. And there are reasons for this. The work environment has evolved to produce these problems. So let's name them. I'm a researcher, I like labels. Broken meaning, information labyrinth, and the blank page. Now, the way I want you to think about these 3 is as your work villains. Right? These are the bad guys. We've talked a lot about superpowers and superheroes today and yesterday. These are the baddies. Now, I had a bit of a meta moment when I was putting this presentation together because I was suffering from the blank page myself. And so, I wanted to make it a fun session. I decided to go to DALL-E, which is an AI image generator. Has anyone tried DALL-E? Yeah. And I said, turn these into comic book villains, like cartoon characters, and this is what it generated. So there you go. These are the images I want you to keep in mind as we talk about these villains, right? As we talk about these bad guys. So our third key research conclusion was, of course, related to, well, how could AI possibly help with these 3 broken work patterns? If we know there are 3 work villains who need to be conquered, who are the bad guys, how can AI as a superpower help solve for them? And so we did a lot of testing. We did a lot of experimentation to try to understand how AI would step in and change these things. And what we saw is that AI will refund us a significant amount of time and energy. So let's talk about each of these work villains a little bit. Let's start with the broken meeting. Meetings are just not working very well. We're not using them very well. We asked employees, what's a good reason to join a meeting? What makes a meeting worthwhile? The number 1 reason selected was to receive the information I will need. And that was ranked above collaboration, above giving feedback. People are logging onto meetings to be passive recipients of information, not active participants. And maybe that's why only 1 in 3 employees think they would be missed if they couldn't join their team meetings. And we asked about team meetings, especially here. We'll have town halls, and big meetings we need to join. 1 in 3 employees think they wouldn't be missed if they couldn't join most of their team meetings. That's an incredibly low number. I want every single person on my team to think they would be missed. And maybe that's because meetings also just are not very clear. Often they are vague, end on notes that aren't very actionable. So what we did is we took all this information and then we created what we call a lab experiment. And that sounds a bit nefarious, it's not. A lab experiment essentially is a controlled environment, and we bring 100 people into the environment. We give 50 of them an AI tool, in this case M365 Copilot. The other 50 don't have access. And then we ask them to do a task. And the task that we did in this case was to summarize a missed meeting. So they were given a 35-minute recording of a meeting that was all about the planning of an offsite. And they had to basically summarize key decisions made, key outstanding items, and then we looked at outcomes. So this is what we saw. We saw employees with Copilot were able to catch up 4 times faster, and they found meeting summarization 58% less draining. That is immediate refund of time and energy, right there. Just those 2 stats. Immediately you get time and energy back. The stat that I felt was most interesting was the 81%. 81% agreed Copilot makes it easier to get the information they needed from meetings, whether they attended or not. And if we think about the first stat I just shared, that said the number 1 reason to join a meeting, to get information I need, what does a meeting look like in 2024, 2025, if I don't need to be in the meeting to get the information I need? That's a very political question that will raise a lot of worries, a lot of fears. Why should we have a meeting today if it no longer becomes about just getting information? The second work villain you'll remember is the information labyrinth. The problem with information right now is that it is everywhere. And this is directly, again, because the environment has evolved to be one in which it costs nothing to communicate. It doesn't cost you anything to send an email. One of the practices that I like to preach with my team is, if this email cost you 50 euros to send, would you send it? And I guarantee you we would all be sending a lot fewer emails. But that's the case now. It's easy to send information, and so we send it. And maybe that's why employees say that only 50% of the information they consume on a daily basis is necessary for their job. Fully half of what you consume on a daily basis is not relevant to what you do. That is a lot of time and energy spent on something that you will get no ROI from. So again, we did a lab experiment here, and this was very simple. Essentially, we put a bunch of different files and different sources, a bunch of different information, a bunch of different documents. We gave 50 of the subjects Copilot, the other 50 didn't, and then we asked them to find the different pieces of information. What we saw that Copilot users found the information 27% faster. They estimated that on that task alone, Copilot had saved them more than 10 minutes. So again, refund of time and energy right away. So we know, that the ability for Copilot and AI to help us retrieve information is immense, but think of the mental relief of not having to spend so much of your day-to-day searching for information. I mean, to just be able to retrieve what you personally need out of a really long file, it's going to provide a lot of relief. The blank page, our final work villain. The blank page is interesting because the problem with the blank page is that when we are tired and when we are stressed, the last thing in the world that we want is to sit in front of a blank page. It is paralyzing. It's a horrible feeling. Now, ideally, we would design the work environment to ensure that we do have rest and recovery, that the pace isn't as incredibly fast as it is. But in the meantime, the ability for Copilot and for AI to get you started on a first draft, to give you that first blank page all filled in, will completely change that feeling. So the final lab experiment we did here, same concept. We tasked users with writing up a blog post. Half of them got Copilot, the other half didn't. We saw those that had Copilot did it 65% faster, so refund of time right there. One of the things I thought was really interesting was that we did a quality-specific test. Now, the thing with speed is often it comes at the expense of quality, and we don't want that. We want creation to be high quality. So we wrote up a bunch of Copilot emails, and then we wrote up a bunch of normal emails, and then we gave them to a blind panel. And we asked the blind panel to rate the quality of these emails. And consistently, the Copilot-written emails rated higher quality on conciseness and on clarity. A blind panel, by the way, is a panel of judges who don't know if the output was written with AI or not. So they have no way of knowing. And again, clearly higher scores on the quality. So, we know AI's ability to help fight these work villains is immense, is full of promise. It will refund us time and energy. It will provide us a load of relief. But this is the fourth, the last, and the most important research conclusion that I will leave you with. And if you take nothing from my talk today, but you take one thing, please take this. Copilot will refund you time and energy, without doubt. All of the research shows it. But how you spend that refunded time and energy, that is going to shape what work will look like in the future. So one of the things that we did with our Copilot users, we asked them to estimate how much time they were saving on a daily basis. And 22% said more than 30 minutes a day. Very interested in this 22%. They're clearly doing something really well. And that amounts to roughly 10 hours or more a month. Now, that felt like quite an abstract figure to me. So I tried to think about, well, what could I spend 10 hours a month on? So here are some of the things. This is what my team would want me to spend it on. A single flight from London to Seattle. My team, they all work on the West Coast in the US, or a full day on site with them. This is what I would like to spend it on. Extra walks with my dog. Or a bunch of runs. I'm a runner. I love running. This is what my manager would want me to spend it on. I'm reading this, and I actually don't think she would want an extra 20 catch-ups with me. But, more output, right? More business-focused outputs. And the thing is that all of these are pretty worthwhile use cases. Like, they're pretty valid things to spend the time on, but who gets to decide how we spend that time? If you don't have a Northern Star strategy for what you want AI to do for you, you're not going to see the ROI. It will refund you time and energy, but you need to be very clear and very specific about what you want to spend that extra time and energy on. Now, this is actually something we asked, that 22%, anyone who saved 30 minutes or more a day, we asked them, what are you spending it on? And very relieved that most people spend it on focus work. Like, as we saw, one of our villains, inability to do focus work. The second most selected answer was meetings. That worries me a little bit, right? I mean, it might well be that these meetings are worthwhile, might well be they're high-value meetings, but I think this represents the dichotomy we will be finding ourselves in. What do we want to spend this refunded time and energy on? So a few key takeaways for you that I want you to bear in mind. AI, don't just think of it as just a tool. Think of it as a brand new dimension of work that we need to think very carefully about how to use. We're all suffering from a time and energy deficiency, and AI's big promise is its ability to refund us time and energy in a world in which the work environment is evolving quicker than our ability to keep pace. But, and again, the single most important one, have a Northern Star strategy for what you want to spend that refunded time and energy on. If you want to improve wellness in your organization, role model going for a run, role model dog walks. If you want to spend it on, better team building, make sure you're role modeling that. Make sure you're telling people use it on offsites. So really be clear on what you want AI to do for you. Now, I started this whole talk with the story of the evolution of the brain, and I want to kind of finish on a similar note. Because as I've hopefully demonstrated to you, so much of how we work today was based on prehistoric ways of working. And this is a really interesting moment in time in which we've expanded so many dimensions, so many ways of working. And the real danger is to try to keep doing things the way we've been doing them. So what I'd invite you to do is this exercise where we really try to shed ourselves of assumptions about how we work and to really think, imagine today is the first day in the history of work. We've never had meetings, we've never had the office. What is an office? And we now have artificial intelligence available to us. Today is the first day in the history of work. How do you design how you work? Thank you so much for your time.